I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I started my own practice called Crystal Clear Mind. And it's a space where I wanted to really help moms, make their mental health a priority and their self-care. And also, a lot of my messaging is around if we are, as moms, when we pour into ourselves and we make ourselves a priority, not only do we feel better and live, healthier lives, but we're also able to be more present with their children and just be the best version of the mom for them that we can be. So it's all connected, right? It's not just about what are the best parenting techniques. Those are helpful and needed, but also how can I show up as the best version of me today for my kids or even for my spouse and, other people that maybe you take care of.
We got the vaccines, people started to reemerge into the world, and we all started going to conferences again, to networking events again, and showing up in our spaces again. And what I'm feeling right now is almost what I'm calling whiplash. I feel like folks are going back to retreat.
People did kind of step out to to get back in. But then I was thinking about for people who maybe were struggling with some form of anxiety prior to COVID, and then they were spending a couple of years in what felt very safe and comfortable for them. And now things have opened up. So they're like, okay, let me try it again. But I almost wonder if maybe they try it in a way where there's just too much stimulation, or it was too much at once. And then their response is to retreat, just like you said, because it's that's what they know, that's what's safe and comfortable to them. So I could definitely see where that's happening for people.
And we know that COVID and isolation has not been good on our mental health. The
Right.
Statistics are significant, especially for certain populations. I know I've read a lot about teens and kids and the mental health crisis that we're having. A lot of it is due to that isolation. We are not meant to be isolated creatures, right? We are social creatures, and a screen, whether it's on your laptop or your phone, is not connection, right? And in fact, the opposite in a lot of cases is true when, especially for both teens and adults, if our social interaction is what we're seeing on an Instagram filter or a TikTok filter or whatever filter, or a filtered version of somebody's life, how does that make us feel, right? We know there's lots of studies out there that social media is a big culprit in this conversation of how, after folks spend time on social media, how they feel about themselves, because what is being presented is an edited version of everyone's life, right? So what is the answer, Krystalynn?
No, I'm just nodding. So I'm yep, all very valid points, right? Another thing too that I've been reading about, and just kind of a good reminder or perspective, is not only have people, are we supporting and working with people who maybe we're kind of pulling them out of their comfort zone or different things like that, of what we've kind of already discussed, but also people have experienced a much higher amount of loss, and a lot of trauma is in that, and just different things that people have had to walk through and experience throughout the last couple of years. And so as they start re-entering, I think what's important, you're asking what do we do? I think one of the things is to be kind to ourselves and to go at a slower pace as we start to reintegrate back into, these spaces, because what happens sometimes is we might get triggered while we're at an event or when we're trying to socialize, because of some of these wounds or the trauma that we've experienced during COVID or during, the time of when we were, the isolation and staying at home, and during that time. So being aware of maybe the loss or different negative experiences that you may have had during these last few years, and what you bring into the space that you're trying to reintegrate into, right? And just having a lot of self-awareness of I'm feeling really triggered right now in this space. What's going on with me? Like, where am I feeling this in my body? What am I maybe, what am I thinking about? What is this situation making me think about? And just, I would say self-awareness is a huge thing to kind of see those connections for yourself, being kind to yourself as you're going through this process. And if this is something that is difficult for you, know that you're not alone in that. A lot of people are trying to manage similar, feelings and having similar struggles. Another thing that I love when people are able to do this is once you've done, say you go to like a networking event or you go to a co-working space, right? And that for some people takes so much energy for them to do that. It takes a lot showing up, especially if they're not just showing up, but they're talking to other people. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot of mental energy, a lot of physical energy. So I would encourage people that after you've done that, after you went to a co-working space, you went to a networking event, whatever it was, do something after that to pour into yourself. Like grab a book, get a cup of tea on your couch, and just kind of take some time to unwind and really have that alone time, because you just went and you were just in a space with a lot of people. So kind of do the opposite now as a way to like reward yourself, but also a good way to recharge. So have some reading time, listen to like a meditation, go for a walk, sit outside in your backyard, just do something to that's going to like fill your cup up. And I think that will also help if we have that balance of not just like, oh, I did this. Okay, now I'm going to go to this event and then I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just do a little bit, a little bit at a time, but make sure you're leaving space for just time for yourself to sit in the quietness and, as a way, I don't know, just kind of have that sense of balance, I think is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice.
Yeah.
For folks that maybe are running other co-working spaces and networking organizations, I think for a lot of us, it was, oh my gosh, things are finally lifted. Everybody's going to come back. My business is going to work again. And then to be like hit with these breaks in 2023 is triggering for me. No, I'm just kidding. So for, those folks that are running groups and events and things of that nature, it's challenging. Like, how do we motivate people to get out of their cocoon, frankly, you know what I mean? And even to follow through. I've seen, folks say Southern California, San Diego, is kind of a flaky, we're not the Northeast, right? And so, I talked to a lot of event organizers and they're like, I had 100 people registered for this event and, 40 showed up. And it's incredibly challenging for these folks that are trying to create community, right? To navigate this. But we need the community, Krystalynn. Like, this is the antidote to isolation. And that isolation has caused a lot of mental health challenges for folks. And so for these folks out there that are, trying to help the world, we're like, wait, what?
Well, I think for one, having this discussion is such a great start. I don't see a lot of these conversations happening, which when you had mentioned this was the topic, I'm like, this is perfect. I mean, it's literally the conversation that we need to be having, right? Like, things have kind of shifted in the space of COVID and things are reopening and we can travel and do more things. And I think a lot of people underestimate like how that can be a challenge for so many people who have social anxiety, general anxiety, depression, even, that this is difficult for them. This is a really difficult transition and not as just going back to the way it used to be, that doesn't really, that may not be their truth and their experience of what's happening for them. And they're needing that additional support to help them come back in, because especially for people struggling with depression and anxiety, staying in isolation a lot of times intensifies those symptoms, right? And kind of in some ways can worsen the problem or symptoms that maybe, that they're experiencing. So they do need to find their community and come back, but it's kind of a way of like, how can we, walk with them in this journey and help them take those little steps, step by step, to reintegrate into their community. And I think if we can take that approach, right, of like, I'm coming alongside you and I'm going to go at the pace that you're going at, but as long as we agree that we're moving towards this goal, right? Rather than trying to rush the process, sometimes that will have people completely, like retreat back and say like, I'm done, can't do it, right? So it's kind of like finding that right pace. But I would say first, this conversation is great. Having spaces like this, whether it's like in the format that we're doing or, a group discussion with some members in your co-working space, but just opening the floor up so that those that have been struggling with it and feeling alone, they might see a conversation like this and be like, oh, this is a real thing. It's okay. Other people feel this way. And so sometimes just normalizing the challenge for people can be really, really helpful and beneficial. So that's one thing. And I think, with Hera, one thing that I really like is there's a combination of spaces that are virtual, and then you have, networking, there's a co-working space, obviously, but having both is kind of nice because I can get that sense of what the community is like in a way that maybe works for me, which could be on a Zoom, like accountability call where there's not 150 people, but there's a few people and I can start to see some faces. I'm still at home, so I feel safe and comfortable. But then maybe when I am ready to take that next step and go into the co-working space, maybe I see some of those faces that I saw on a virtual call, right? So it kind of helps me to feel like I'm not walking into a space where I'm not going to know anybody in there at all. And like, okay, let me try to navigate this. So I think that's really helpful. And then I know from my own experience of some of the events that I've been hosting and just asking for feedback of like, what was it like for you to come here today? And I've heard that from some people, like the challenge or maybe nervousness of walking into a new space. And what helped them was that they came with a friend. And so maybe in the way that we market things, we really encourage people to bring a friend and make it feel, then they're leaning on their own natural community to come into your space. And I think for some people, that could be really helpful for them too, is like, hey, can you come with me? Can you come work with me in this co-working space? Or whatever, come with me to this event or something like that. I think that could be really helpful.
That's such a great idea, Krystalynn. Thank you for saying that, because for folks that are organizing events, maybe that's what they look at, is offering, a buddy discount or encouraging that. Something you also said that brings to mind what folks can do is even letting folks know who is going to be at the event, who's registered, right? So you can kind of get a sense of, maybe like you go
sneak peek. Yeah,
exactly. Check out some LinkedIn profiles before you, show up, kind of thing. So you do, and maybe that's even encouraged. Maybe that's an activity that folks do with those, folks that have registered, like make it fun, right? Like, hey, here's who's coming, pick 2 people and find something that you have in common with them. So when you show up, you can chat with them at the event and that instant connection.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. Any ways to kind of help, be a part of the, like helping people take those initial steps of interacting with one another, because it can be a lot. I mean, even for people who don't have anxiety or depression, walking into a room where there's 100 people and I maybe know 1 or 2, like that can feel very, can feel intimidating. It can be challenging if you're not used to doing that. And especially considering we've kind of been on pause from doing that, right, for quite some time. And if that's not in your natural way of how you are working, it's almost like a muscle, right? Like we haven't been working out this muscle of socializing and networking and being around people. And so now we're in this phase, I think, of just retraining that muscle, making it stronger. And how do you do that? You just keep the consistency is really what's key. But it doesn't have to be big steps along the way. You can take smaller steps as long as there's movement and you know what your goal is, right?
I think this is where co-working spaces could be a bridge, a transition, right? For folks that are experiencing that, as opposed to going to your local Chamber of Commerce event with 100 people.
Yes.
In a local co-working space where there's 12 people that day. Right. Mm-hmm. And when you do join that co-working space, let your community director or whoever it is you're connecting with, let them know, like, hey, I'm coming out.
Yeah. First timer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, hey, make sure to introduce me to some people here.
Yes.
Like just ask for what you need, frankly.
I know as a mom, I have had a similar experience, but in a different space. But when I'm joining, like, say, a mom group, and I've I've contacted the mom that's hosting it and let her know, like, it's my first time coming to an event, just want to let you know, and this is who I am, and, so on and so forth. So it kind of helps, because then when I show up, like, typically the first 5 minutes, it's a little bit of a smoother transition of me coming into the space. So
that's awesome. One thing I want to emphasize is the importance of community for folks as we reemerge from our cocoons.
Yeah.
Speak to that, just how you see that as a therapist and that importance of having that community. One thing that I've read a lot about, and it really fascinates me, is the fact that we pulled away from the church. Right. The church, whatever that is, used to be, no matter your religion, used to be the place that folks came and built community. And a lot of folks say co-working is the new church. And that's an interesting way to pose it. Yeah. But spaces like co-working spaces and other spaces are, for some, that opportunity to create community and connect.
I mean, I talk about it a lot in my work, but I also live it too. I mean, I enjoy co-working for, like, my professional needs, but also my personal space. I make it a point to find community for, just different parts of my life, whether that's spiritually, I have a community there with friendships and motherhood journey. There's a community for that. And then as well as with working and co-working spaces too. So, I not only try to encourage people to find it, but I value it myself, because, there's just, when you're with other people, you're able to, it's a two-way street, right? Like, I can lean on the people in my community and have support and be poured into. And then there are times where I'm able to do that for others. I can be encouraging to them, and so on and so forth. So, and again, kind of what we're talking about, of that, like, sometimes when we're going through things, whether it's I'm really struggling with, reintegrating back into these spaces and whatnot, then you're able to have those conversations with other people that maybe can share, like, I used to have the same problem. Here are some things that I did that were really helpful. And it could just be really validating. So I think, one, I would say it's really important. I feel like it helps in just all areas of our life. And as far as finding your community, again, I would say start small, start in spaces that are a little bit more, a space that maybe you to some extent. And if that's a co-working space, coming in there, and maybe it might feel like at first, I'm not really sure, where to start. Do I just show up and work there? Or, like, how do I really establish community in that space? But, maybe you find one of those events that you're going to go to, and something that feels doable for you. Maybe you've emailed the person that's hosting it, so already there's only like 10 people coming. Okay, great. That's my speed. I'm going to go to that first. Or you look for the virtual event, and that's your first, like, your first foot in the door is I'm going to go to the virtual co-working hour and just kind of see what that feels like and get a feel for things. So I would say, start off really small, find like one event that's on the smaller scale in terms of like number of attendees, and then work your way up from there. And then the other piece again is maybe find, depending on the event and if it's applicable, but bringing someone with you if that's an option. I would try that as well.
I appreciate your perspective as a therapist. I know you're on the front line seeing what's happening as far as mental health happens right now. So
no, this was really great. And I always love being in spaces where we can bridge mental health with another like company or another area. And so we were able to do that, of bridging mental health with like community and co-working space. And so I think that's really great.